So this is, today it is known as the Jackson House, and O.T. Jackson, of course, was the founder of both the colony and the town site. This particular building was in terrible condition a little more than 20 years ago. It was falling down. As a matter of fact, the consensus of many people was that it should just be demolished and gotten rid of.
After the Civil War is over with, slavery is officially over with, but there's still other kinds of rules that keep Black people, almost as slaves in the South and so forth. They're coming up from the South, they're going to places like New York and Chicago to work in factories and so forth. But some of them decided to come out to Colorado. And those in the Denver area and other places, again, wanted their own land and their own homes. And Dearfield was one of the reasons that they came out there. And also, they had their own government there, their small government system. So there were Black people that were in charge of Black people. And the farmland was good. It was highly successful. They had bumper crops of everything for a few years. And you could make it being a farmer at Dearfield. And you could walk around with your head up. And so a lot of people left their city communities to come out to Dearfield, Colorado, and begin a new life. Now what you see here, because it looks like just ruins, but before we came in, there was dirt everywhere on the walls and everything like that. And what we've been able to do is to begin to clean the place up, because there was nothing in here except junk and trash and so forth. So not only have we been able to do that, but clean it up such that we can even see what some of the original wallboard looks like. We've been able to get rid of the animals that were in here, put in glass, safety plastic over the windows and so forth. And so we're gradually trying to restore the interior to what it looked like in the past.
So O.T. Jackson's background was as a businessman. And he had businesses in the Boulder area. He'd run a cafe in Denver. He had managed the Chautauqua site over by Boulder with he ran the restaurant, the food hall, and things there. So he had a lot of experience in business. And so when he decided that no one else was going to do it, and he was going to found an African American town site, an agricultural colony, he was going to do it as a businessman too. So we are located along US 34. US 34 was created at the turn of the last century, as a road that came off of the first transcontinental highway called the Lincoln Highway, which ran along the border north of here in Nebraska and Wyoming. And so they ran a branch. They ran two branches. One is I-76 to our south, and that went to Denver off of the Lincoln Highway. Sorry about the sound. And the other one went right past here, and O.T. Jackson knew it was going to go right past the town site. As a matter of fact, it's probably why he placed the town site where it is, so he could be on a major road. And as a result of that, he established, this is the filling station that was built about 1919. And it doesn't look like much now, but it's going to be recreated and rebuilt here pretty quick with a National Park Service grant. And then there was a cafe across the road, across Washington Avenue, which is falling down, and we don't know whether we're going to try to reconstruct part of that or not. It kind of depends on funding down the road. But so he had a cafe, he had a filling station, and behind the filling station there was a small building that was called the blacksmith shop. And that's where Squire Brockman, we talked about earlier, who was the town blacksmith, it was also the mechanic. And so when people broke down along the road, he would work on their cars. And then he would sell them fried chicken and, you know, all kind of barbecue. And George can tell you a little bit about it. Back in 1985, the Black American West Museum became very interested in Dearfield. And at that time, they had no ownership or anything of the town site. And so they, out of museum resources, they hired a historic preservation group out of Fort Collins, associated with Colorado State University, to do a historical survey of Dearfield. From that time on, they managed to get State Historic Fund grants that came along a little bit later. They were able to get a number of state appropriations to buy land to be able to acquire parts of the old town site. That's how it started. There were no preservation efforts trying to keep the buildings intact or anything at that time, because they had to own it before they could do anything to be able to preserve it.
I always ask the question, somebody ought to do something about this. Who's going to do it? And I'd ask others and always wondered about that. I was elected Weld County Commissioner in 2006. I went out to a meeting in Morgan County with the Morgan County Commissioners. I passed by the town site. And then I came back and I thought somebody ought to do something about this site, and somebody got elected. So I started putting together other interested folks, and we started having meetings and talking about the future of Dearfield and how do we preserve and interpret and educate people about the history here.
The first preservation effort of any substance was in 2001, when the museum was able to get a state appropriation to put a new foundation under the Jackson House, the old Dearfield Hotel, Dearfield Lodge, and do the roof, repair the entire roof, stabilize the rafters and stuff like that. And so that was a big thing, and that was the start of the preservation efforts. By 2009, we're simply trying to find ways to protect the buildings that were still out there. Weld County, for instance, they have a youth corps group who goes around and fixes things mainly on a volunteer basis. And they came out and put in a chain link fence. We got donations from an oil company to be able to buy the materials. And so we started to try to protect the buildings. And that's where vandalism has been a problem for a very long time. A lot of the buildings that were out there before we began to get involved in the site had been stripped of materials. Bricks, for instance, on a lot of the chimneys had been collected for many, many years by people in the area. So we've been in the process of trying to protect those buildings from vandalism. We reached a point now where we're in pretty good shape. We have chain link fences around the standing buildings and some of the fallen buildings. We have steel doors over the front of, steel screen doors over the front of them to protect people from kicking their way into them. And we're going to eventually develop even more security as we get the buildings restored. So the preservation effort has been fighting against the natural elements, the natural deterioration of the buildings themselves as they get older and older. Remember, all the buildings out there are pretty much more than a century old, and they haven't been maintained all that well for a long period of time. So they've collapsed, they've blown down, they've fallen apart. So we're at the point where we're going to have to rehabilitate some of the buildings, and maybe if we decide we want those in the demonstration part of the site, that we're going to have to rebuild them in some way. We do have a lot of materials, but we'll have to add new materials. And then the two standing buildings we're going to restore. That's the plan anyway.
Go ahead.
Sure.
And I'll turn it over to the congressman.
Thank you. And thanks for being here, folks. What a great opportunity is that we've heard so many times that if we don't learn from our history, we repeat our history. And that's why we want to make sure we preserve places like Dearfield and learn from it. And frankly, I have driven by that sign 100 times and had no idea what Dearfield was about until I got a call from my good friend, here's Lori Singh, who is the county commissioner, and this is in her district, in her county commissioner district, and started learning about this. And it's just
the history is bigger than all of us, and the history has to be told. It has to be preserved, and it's just been an honor and a pleasure to work with George and Bob and Bill and all of the committee folks that are out of the Greeley area, and just to have that connection that there is a very powerful history in Colorado, period, of that Black migration west, and the whole migration west is even a bigger picture. But we are just honored to be here, and I just want to thank you guys for putting all of this together.
Well, Dearfield in particular is a Weld County story, and it's a Colorado story and a U.S. American story. It's a story of entrepreneurship. It's a story of folks wanting to own their own land and the importance of being able to make something out of the items that you own. And that's why it's an important factor of our history here in Weld County that we want to preserve.
Why did you come here today then?
Today, mostly because my daughter is African American and I want her to know about her past and about her culture. Are you looking at the camera?
Without knowing your past, you are doomed to redo the future. Or, I shouldn't say redo, but make similar mistakes. History has value. The people that built history, that built this country, that developed and shaped the history, the past, shapes the future, shapes the present and the future.